You're all right.
Really care. I've been in hospital, there's no dignity.
You're all right.
Okay. All good. Okay, welcome everyone to extraordinary meeting to adopt the final long-term plan. Welcome to Deputy Mayor Basher online, Councillors O'Keefe and Webb also attending online. Are there any other apologies? Just Ned Telford. Everyone else is here, I think. So we know the apology of Ned. I'll move that way. Is there a seconder? Councillor Grafton, all in favour? Any against? That's carried. Thank you. Agenda item 2 is members' interest. Are there any matters on the agenda for which members wish to declare a financial or non-financial interest? Right. No, there's nothing. Oh,
Probably only just what's in the minutes of the long-term plan of association with those groups that I was involved with.
So there's no minutes on the agenda, but yeah, like you say, but how do you want to deal with that? I don't think it's material. Those decisions have already been made. Yeah. Okay, I don't think we need to record that, but we can if you want to, Councillor. Just note, you can just note Councillor Sampson noted her involvement with community groups who are recipients of funding in the long-term plan. Happy with that? Okay, with that one notification, all those in, I'll move that way. So a seconder. Councillor Grafton, all in favour? Any against? That's carried. Thank you. Okay. Agenda item 3 is the long-term plan, and I'll look to John Salmon, who has been in charge of this project throughout, to take us through the report. And I believe we have our auditor going to be zooming in as well to take us through.
Yeah.
John, please.
Through the chair, thank you, Your Worship. First of all, thank you to all the elected members and for everything that's occurred over the last 2 or 3 years. This has been a project that has this has obviously come to a head today, but it's been a long one, that's for sure. We've had many hours discussing it, deliberating it. We've made many decisions through the piece. One thing I would like to say, certainly from my perspective and the Chief Executive's perspective, we just want to also thank the staff for their input. It's been very time consuming, and there's been a heck of a lot to get through. So I just want to say my thanks to everyone as well for that. We have got Stuart Much, our the EY partner, on the phone today. He has joined us from Kuala Lumpur. So another thank you I want to put out there is just to the audit team. They have worked really long hours over the last week or two to get this thing to where we're at today. So thanks to them, and I'm really glad that the working relationship we're starting to build with the audit as well. So hopefully that can continue. As I said, I did give a full project summary back when we adopted the draft long-term plan. So I certainly won't go do that again today. I think we've spent enough time talking about that. But I think there has been obviously a few changes been made in the document since then, based on the submissions, the deliberations process that we have made some decisions on. There is a couple of things that has came out today from a couple of councillors, so thank you for pointing them out. One of them is around the reserves disclosure. Councillor Reedy pointed that out to us. We will make that as an amendment based on the Chief Executive's amendments that he hopefully delegated to do. And some examples from rating specifics that Councillor Nealon had mentioned that were in the consultation document. We'll also get them added into the published document based on the Chief Executive's amendments. So in terms of the report that you've got in front of you, I'll obviously pass it over to Stuart to talk through the audit opinion. However, if there's any questions or anything that we want to talk about, I'm more than happy to take any questions from yourselves. Thank you.
Well, so we'll go to Stuart, and then we'll take questions of Stuart, and then we'll take questions of the general plan. So John. Stuart, thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. Firstly, apologies for not being able to make it in person. I had a sort of prior commitment work-wise that I had to be offshore for, but it was nice to see you back in April. So, look, first, I do want to show my appreciation to the team at Council that's put the LTP together and supported us with our endless amounts of annoying inquiries. So, ultimately, the objective has been to produce an effective long-term plan for the district, and I think you've got a good document that's reflective of a lot of deep thinking and a lot of work by many people over the course of the last couple of years, as reflected by John. So, in terms of our audit, it's obviously covered, we covered a lot of work before we got to the consultation document. We then sort of kept in touch during your consultation process. And over the course of the last couple of weeks, it's been pretty intense as management have both adopted and absorbed all the various different decisions made by council between the CD and the long-term plan, but also there's been a number of matters where further evidence has come to pass that have enabled management to make updates to the long-term plan, which hadn't necessarily been in the draft plan for the consultation period. Those are items that don't impact rates and they don't impact the overall feel of things, but they do sort of improve the general quality of the forecasting information. So, for example, the spend of some of the infrastructure acceleration fund, which hadn't been included in the draft LTP that supported the CT, simply because you hadn't finished your work to understand when that was going to occur. That, certain elements of that have now been forecasted. Now, that has no impact on rates or anything else, but it's an important thing to include in your plan. So we completed our work upon receipt of a signed letter of representation. We will be able to issue our audit report. The version of the LTP has been changing a little bit over the course of the last week. We'll do a few more sort of qualitative checks before it gets posted onto the internet, but really, I think we've got it across the line. In terms of areas of focus, obviously, as part of the support for the CD, we did a lot of work around asset management, did a lot of work around the various different questions that you asked the community and the planning behind those questions. One of the key things that we've updated our understanding of over the course of the last week or two is really around the doability. So there's been some questions in regards to how much of your 24-25 work plan is effectively being carried over into 25-26. And as a consequence of that, and also your large program of work that you've now got scheduled, we've asked more probing questions of management in regards to, will you get all this work done? We're not disputing whether they're good projects to do or not, but essentially sort of saying, will you have capacity to do that? So one of the elements of that work was really to understand at what stage each of those different projects are at. Have you contracted or have you designed it, going through that process? But you've assessed that assumption in terms of the ability to actually complete all those projects as a high risk assumption, which we think is appropriate. But now that you're about to adopt the long-term plan, my encouragement is to get on and get into that work program, because it's not small. Associated with your work program is obviously your debt levels. A bit unusual to sort of see a single number as your debt cap. Management forecasting that you will remain underneath that debt cap. And it's obviously also going to require significant monitoring and management as your significant physical projects are undertaken, because they'll absorb significant amounts of the debt over the course of the first 2 to 3 years in particular, before you sort of settle down into a little bit more of a repayment program rather than a raising new debt program. One of the things So our audit report is unfortunately an adverse opinion. Now that's not necessarily a slight on how the forecasts have been prepared, other than the fact that you've got the assumption that you will continue to hold and maintain your water services assets and services within your council operations. And so the forecasts that you have, the long-term plan that you have in front of you, includes all your water services, even though your preferred option is to outsource that to a third party, to a multi-council CCO. Although I'm not privy to the discussions that were had this morning, so I presume that's still the case. And so, as a consequence of that, essentially your forecasts don't align with your core assumptions, and this is something that we are seeing up and down the country, particularly up and down the West Coast. And so, while that's unfortunate, it's really just a sort of almost a statement of fact, but it doesn't necessarily suggest that the numbers are wrong in the form in which they've been prepared. It just says that it doesn't essentially align with your baseline assumption around the ownership of those assets. The second matter I'll draw attention to is the special purpose road and the level of work that you propose. We've, as discussed at the consultation document stage, we qualified the consultation document opinion for the assumptions that you've made in regards to the road to Karamea. Essentially, in year 3 to 9, you have forecast a significant uptick in the capital spend, and as the consequence, the NZTA funding for that. I think this is a matter that we discussed back in April. Really, there's no change in the scenery there, so I won't go into that in any more detail. And the last item is we just draw the reader's attention. Sorry, was that a question?
No,
So the last matter I'll draw your attention to is that we have included an emphasis of matter, and that's just drawing the reader's attention to the fact that the council hasn't adopted the 23 and 24 annual reports. We've done suitable work to be confident in regards to the opening balance sheet for the purposes of the long-term plan, and this is the 23 and 24, or particularly the 24 annual report, is something I've personally sort of taken responsibility for. So we will carry on with that work, or get on with that work and get that behind us. But for the sake of the long-term plan, we don't think that requires us to qualify the long-term plan. We're just making mention of that fact for the sake of the planning document. Sorry, I've gone on for a little bit there. Happy to take any questions or queries from members, happy to answer any questions.
Great, thank you, Stuart. Questions? Councillor Howard.
You've got the adverse opinion on the water service delivery, but what other option have we got? Sort of go give some indication to the ratepayers of what water is going to cost to deliver under whoever or however it's delivered. So what other option did we have other than to put it as we have?
Look, the only other, given the path that the council is heading towards in regards to taking those water services off balance sheet, so to speak, the only other option would have been to actually forecast the long-term plan excluding the 3 water services. But it was agreed that essentially that would require an awful lot of work, and it wasn't necessarily locked in stone that it would necessarily happen. So I think the position adopted by council is fully understandable. Unfortunately, you're caught up somewhat in the implications of the forecast financial statement accounting standards and the audit thereof. But we have looked at those water services, the work that you've programmed, the projects that you've got in place, and we've audited all those numbers as if they were going to be there. We haven't just sort of said, oh well, it's water, we're not going to talk about it. So you can take that degree of confidence.
Thank you. Councillor Reedy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and hello, Stuart. Working capital for, can you hear me okay? Working
Yes,
capital
absolutely.
For BDC, as you would have noticed to begin with, through your audit, do you consider that BDC have sufficient working capital given that they are going to move from Westpac to local LGFA? LGFA do not provide overdraft facilities. Westpac, of course, who's the government finance or banker, they do provide us with working capital, overdraft facility. So we can pay wages and then accounts payable. I'm sure you would have looked at what we've got here, but the amount of cash that we have available is extremely low, like about 200,000-300,000 at any time in the across the plan. So how have you seen this organisation being able to service their payments on a monthly basis or fortnightly basis, given that we have no overdraft facility?
Look, I mean, I don't believe that you will end your relationship with Westpac. It's just that you will be moving your significant debt portion. So you've got $20 million worth of debt with Westpac at the present time. My understanding is that you will utilise LGFA for that and any other further debt raising. And really the answer to that, and especially as there is sort of major capital program work in front of you, will be just improved, ongoing treasury management in terms of forecasting that spend so that you can signal to the LGFA when you need to draw down your funds in an adequate time so that you can meet your creditors' obligations as they fall due. So that's just really around looking forward, under the connectivity between the team looking at things from a treasury debt management perspective and the engineers who are signing off projects and expect us to receive invoices from the likes of West Reef. Just being able to forecast that in an effective way so that you have the funds available when you have to meet those various different credit payment dates. So the facilities will be there and available through the LGFA. It's just about the timing of you drawing down those funds and then monitoring how your drawdowns of debt are going against your original forecasts.
Thank you. Any other questions, councillors of the auditor? Councillor Naylor?
Yeah, hi, Stuart. You talked about the doability of getting all the work done, and we're already significantly behind in the current year and likely to carry over a lot. What are the consequences if we get to the same situation at the end of the next financial year?
Well, there aren't really any direct consequences other than the fact that you will be you'll be charging targeted rates and you'll be rating the ratepayers for projects that you expect to complete. Now, there's a number of that projects within that capital program, like let's say it's the IAF or RIF-funded program of work or Development West Coast, where the revenues, the funding sources are from different places other than from debt, but or targeted rates. But ultimately, you've programmed this work because you think your infrastructure needs that work. So it's important to get it done. And it's, you don't want to be pushing a big bow wave of incomplete infrastructure work forward over the years because it'll just get on top of itself. So I'm really just putting that out as a word of warning. I mean, let's say you've got $30 to $35 million worth of infrastructure or capital constructive work to be done in the next 12 months. If you don't get all that out of the way, that's not the end of the world, but you want to get well through it if you can, because essentially you're saying there's the funding opportunities to do that, the assets need the work, and you just don't want to defer renewals work on pipeline assets or things like that any further than you need to. ultimately there may be some risks around compliance to consents. There may be risks of increased maintenance spend if you do not do that renewals work. So if things get tight, then it's about prioritizing the really important stuff versus some of the more discretionary stuff, even though you still want to achieve that discretionary work at some point in the near future.
Thank you. Councillor Grafton.
So just another one to carry on from that, Stuart. Is there an acceptable level of works done over council's average around the countryside?
Sorry, look, if it's, I mean, ideally we'd like to sort of see, there's a normal expectation that if you think you can achieve 80 to 90% of projects that you plan in a year, then that's actually probably pretty good. You'd never get 100% of your projects done because things come up, certain consenting challenges or planning challenges arise. But if you're only doing 50 or 60% of your work, then actually you're just going backwards. So sorry, I didn't quite catch your question properly, but if that doesn't cover it.
Yeah, I think you've answered it.
again.
It was just roughly what's a good level of achievement in terms of capital spend. So
Yeah,
here,
if you start
70-80% or better.
Yeah, if you start slipping below 70-75%, then it's not a good sign that you're getting enough work done.
Thank you. Any other questions? Anyone online? Questions? Nope. Okay. Thanks, Stuart.
Pleasure.
Any questions of John or John more broadly about the LTP or the report? Sorry, Councillor Nolan.
Just in terms of the total rate rise, if you like, I thought when we left the other day, it was sitting slightly under 6%. Now it's quite a bit over 6%.
John.
Thank you, Councillor Naylor. Yeah, the general rate movement after deliberations was 5.95. The total rates movement is 6.43. So the total rates movement between the consultation document and now, there's a 0.28% uplift. It was 6.15 and it's now 6.23. Total rates. 6.43, sorry, yeah, sorry. Apologies, yes, 0.28 of a difference.
Okay. Any other questions on I think the report's quite good because it does summarize. It's not a touchscreen, is it? It does summarize the key decisions that we've made leading up to this. So I think that's quite good. So, we have, for anyone watching, we have already debated a number of the inclusions and not inclusions and voted on those in previous council meetings. So that provides some explanation as to why they're there and why perhaps most councillors are aware of what they are and what they aren't. Councillor Naylor.
We've set ourselves a self-imposed rate cap of 7.5%, and yet I think it is at the 26-27 year is over 9%. How does that work, given that we've got a cap?
Thank you, Councillor Naylor. Yeah, you can breach the cap ultimately. That's something you can go over. I mean, ultimately, we had our rates cap previously was less than it was just now. But in terms of the legislation behind doing it, you are allowed to go above your cap. And I think it's only 1 year that we have in terms of the 9-year plan. Has any of the finance team got anything to add to that?
Any other questions? Okay, so there's recommendations there 1 through 9. Do we want to move them? Is there anyone want to suggest any changes to any of those, or we move them as a group? Saves a lot of reading out things if it's acceptable to move 1 through 9. I'm happy to move that way. If there's a seconder. Councillor Weston. We can vote on them individually if you wish, but if no one wants me to do that, we won't do that either. Okay, open it for debate. So 1 through 9 has been moved and seconded. Open that for debate. Councillor Sampson.
We just, approve them separately, please.
Vote on them separately? Yep, that's fine. Any debate? Councillor Reedy?
Question, if I may please, Mr Mayor. Number 2, approves and adopts the various policies that we have, and it says there without amendment, as contained within the attached that we've got, without amendment, remember that. And down here under 9, we've got approved the chief executive to sign, and mayor to sign off any grammatical or minor amendments. To me, that's contradictory that we're going to without amendment, or we aren't. What's it going to be, please?
It's a good question.
Through the chair, yeah, thank you, councillor Reedy. I meant in terms of this number 2 would only be, we wouldn't be making any amendments to these ones. They would be approved without an amendment, but any other amendments, minor grammatical on the rest of the plan, the chief executive would be delegated to amend. I mean, ultimately, we can change the wording of number 2 if you want to take without amendment out. That would be a suggestion, but ultimately it's only on these policies. These policies would be the way they are just now.
Because they are separately identifiable within the plan.
Yep.
Yep, thank you. Okay. Any other debate or points of clarification? Councillor Nolan?
I guess everybody knows I'm going to be voting against it, and the reason I think I pointed out right at the start of the process that I didn't think there was any justification for a rate rise of more than about 2.53%, which was the then current rate of inflation. I still stand by that. I think I get it that there's pipes that need replacing. I'm certainly not against it. I have a little bit of a difficulty with it that we've just talked a lot this morning and earlier today about how it's going to be a much more efficient, much more cheaper to go to the combined CCO, and yet we're hell bent on doing some of the pipe work in the next few years before the CCO actually gets up and running. So a little bit of concern there. But in terms of replacing them, no problem with that. I understand that there's been a deficit, if you like, a maintenance deficit or replacement deficit over the last 20 or 30 years, which has brought us to this point. But I guess I was around on a lot of those councils at that time, but we did do a lot of things. We didn't, there weren't too many years where we had a 0% rate rise. We built a recreation centre, we built an MBS theatre, we did a lot of work on the tunnels, we did a lot of work on the treatment plant for both Reefton and Westport's water. So we weren't avoiding things. I guess we just prioritise things a little differently. And I understand now that we need to prioritise pipes in the ground. So I get it. But I guess what I'm hearing, and we heard it again today, is that people are hurting, that people can't afford continual rate rises of the order of 6.43% when we've had a 14 and a 9.5, and then the following year up to this first year, we're going to have another 9-point-something%. So we needed to prioritise. I think I've said it countless times. So some of those things that we are doing, if the pipes in the ground need replacing, we need to actually keep it affordable for our people, and that's around the 2.53% rate rise, and knock some of the things that aren't priorities off. And I don't think we've laboured over it, and we've heard the submissions and everything, but we never really delivered what I hoped we would deliver in terms of reprioritising some of the projects or some of the things that we're doing, and concentrating on replacing those pipes in the ground. So not happy that it's 6.43 in total, even less happy on a personal note, because I I just saw the example for my property, which has no targeted rates, but it has a 6.14, I think, rise in general rates. So not sure how that works when it's a 6.43 overall. And I see some of the in the examples were up to 11% for some of the Northern Buller properties, which is, you know, pretty horrific for them. So I guess I'll harp on what I always harp on. I'd like to see two figures, one the general rate figure and one a targeted rate figure, and then you can have your total rates figure. But for those people that don't have water, sewage rates, you know, it would be much easier for us to work out what our rate rise is going to be if we had actually presented that figure in our LTP. The other thing that I guess I'm worried about too is the carryovers, the work, you know, from what we got last meeting was a relatively high percentage of carryover work. That does, in my view, mean that we've overrated. And when you overrate in a 14% year, that sort of cuts to the chase a bit with, you know, the way people are feeling, that they're feeling as though we're making them into ATMs, I guess is one of the saying. But yeah, I just feel for the people that can't afford that, they're on fixed incomes, and well, you know, we've capped it at 7.5%, you know, over 10 years, it's over 50% rate increase. And I'm not sure that people are actually going to be able to carry on living in Buller under those conditions. Not everybody, but there'll be a big percentage of people. So yeah, not happy that we haven't trimmed it as much as I think we could have, but look forward to the next one.
Thank you. Anyone else? Councillor Sampson.
I concur exactly with what Graham said, and will continue on that I haven't seen the actual rate rise in the areas, and to hear this about 11% in Northern Buller, that's on top of probably 11% plus last year, and that's not with a targeted rate. Not many areas up there would have a targeted rate. And again, I'm not at all happy to see what our debt ceiling is, with it being dropped from 58 million down to 57.4. I didn't feel that was enough for it to be dropped, considering if we're, well, it's not if we are going into water done well, and a lot of that infrastructure costs won't be with council. So why council have got that debt ceiling of $57.4 million without having being responsible for that infrastructure, or be another organisation or that's going to be there. So I just find that's excessive.
Thank you. It's just raised a point, which I think is a point we should get clarified, John, around the Māori Council CCO, and I think we flagged all the way through that there would need to be an amendment to the LTP. So we're not in a position, my understanding is we're not in a position to rack down that debt number yet, because we haven't actually got a viable option. But next year there will be a plan change that will reflect exactly what Councillor Sampson's suggesting.
Through your worship, and thank you, Councillor Sampson. Yeah, you're absolutely correct. That's if we, with the decision taken earlier today, that will trigger an LTP amendment. I think there'll be a few things that we'll have to put into that, but that will certainly be the case of looking at the debt as well. So yeah, good point.
Thank you.
But there were other things that were cut out, but that debt level could have come down.
Okay, any Councillor Reedy.
So I was asking the question before, but just part of the debate now. Just a couple of things. Stuart's mentioned, of course, the CapEx carryovers, which we have control over when it comes to council and the like. But with maintenance and the like, we have X million set aside for, or sorry, just to go back to the CapEx, we know from experience we only get about $15 million done a year. Doesn't matter how many contractors you bring in, We've had carryovers in the past, and I accept that we don't rate for that until we draw down the loan. So that's okay, but we seem to be pushing our CapEx too high. Should always be around about 15 million. We've accepted that 15 to 18 million. Look at maintenance. Now, during the year, we say, okay, we're going to spend $10 million on maintenance, on whatever it's going to be. Sometimes we don't meet that because, of course, other things intervene. Now, all of a sudden, so we rated, because this is actual cash that we're talking about, so we're going to be rated for $10 million. But in the end, they only end up doing $8 million worth of BAU maintenance. There's $2 million that we've been rated for. So then we come and do the next year's budget, and we say, okay, we've got to do this, and this, and then that includes the $2 million. Highly probable that includes that $2 million that we've been rated for previously. In my view, the ratepayer is being rated potentially twice on BAU maintenance that's not completed in the year in which it was proposed. I agree with Graham in terms of the inflation. Sorry, not the inflation, the rate that we've gone up. I hear what John's saying. We consulted on this originally of about 6.14. We actually brought it back down to about 5.5 during our deliberations, or not deliberations, sorry, but yeah, during deliberations. And then there was a motion put forward by Annalise to bring back in the grants, 80,000. That suddenly brought it up to about 5.94. And Phil also mentioned it to me. Happy about that. But since then, we've now gone to 6 point whatever it is on there. What's the driver behind that increase? It's all very well telling me that we originally consulted on X percent, and now we've just grown up a little bit. But in actual fact, during deliberations, we brought it right back. So why the change?
One's general, one's overall rates.
Pardon?
One's general, you're talking about general rates and overall rates.
No.
Yeah, hang on. Yep.
Can I, sorry.
So John did explain that. Attempted to explain.
BAU. Yeah. BAU rates. And we're talking just now about this, my understanding of 6%, Mr. Mayor, is general rate, not targeted rates. Is that correct or not?
So one number includes the total rates collected, which includes general rates and targeted rates. And the other number, my understanding, was a general rate movement only.
And which is the that case?
Yep. So there's your difference.
Which is it 6% or?
So the 6.4. John, I'll let you answer.
Yeah, through a chair. Yeah, the target, the general rate is 5.95, and the total rates movement is 6.43%.
On board. Yep. Okay, so I'm happy about that. Thanks, Phil. And the other one, of course, is that just going on, talking about the rates increase. Graham's mentioned it, about 2.5%. I don't really care what other councils are doing. I raised it during deliberations that we had this notion of localised inflation, which we were rated for over 3 annual plans, including the EAP, sorry. And I suggested you take 400,000 out of that and give it back to the ratepayer. 400,000 out of $1 million, basically. That brings it down to about 3%, our rates, or general rates, 2.5% to 3%. Why hasn't it been done? So I hear what's going on. We just escalate all the time. Levels of service, infrastructure failing, what have you. We hear the same excuse every year. But if you're maintaining a steady flow, then by rights, you should be consistent right through, apart from an element of inflation. So that's I'll be voting against because I just cannot accept.
Thank you. Councillor Farrell.
Just firstly to, I guess, defend myself against that. In our discussions on the long-term plan, the grants funding was included in that, right? So we didn't increase that funding at all. It was already included in the number that was there. And if I'm not wrong, you were the one who seconded that motion that I put forward to reduce the rate, the grants pool to 80,000, to reduce it. It was already included, so just let that settle. I'm not in favour of this rate rise at all, but I don't think voting against the motion on the table is going to solve the affordability issues we have in our district. I think the time to do that would have been over the last 12 months that we've had workshops and meetings about this plan, not to wait till the last meeting that we have to accept it and then be upset that it is what it is, that we've worked through this whole time. I think when Brad Olsen came here from Infometrics to talk about inflation and the cost pressures on council, that was really informative about, you know, the different cost of different things. So water pipes aren't affected by the general rate of inflation. They have their own inflationary measures, just like fertiliser did 4 years ago. The price of fertiliser went up 40%. That wasn't in line with the general rate of inflation. And not everything is. There's butter we've seen recently. Everything's affected differently. And that's somewhat not within our control. So the best way we can try and tackle that rate rise is to really push back on government as to what they are forcing us to do and reprioritise and decide, you know, do we want a district where we have a gym and a pool and a community, or are we willing to give that up for the cost of that service? So I'm not in favour of increasing rates year upon year. I don't think it's sustainable, but as I said, voting against that isn't going to change that fact.
Thank you. Councillor Grafton.
Yeah, I'm along those similar lines. I don't think we can rate for inflation. I think that to me means we're going backwards, which is doing pretty much what we've been doing. Just to go on about the increase in rates, as Annalise said before, I think we did actually increase rates the other day with the grants. It was an add-on of about 60,000, which was seconded by Colin, which increased rates to what we were. We started off at 5.5. The motion was passed to increase rates to 5.95.
Yes. What's your point of order? Yes.
There's no need to bring me into the fact that we went from 5.5 to 5.94. That's a given. Okay, we actually went down. I just want to make it quite clear. We went down to about 31,000. We then increased it. The motion was to bring it to about 80 or 85,000. I supported that. Okay, I was then told by Phil that's added on about 0.5%, 0.45%. I agreed with that because then I turned around and said, not 1% of staff expenses. Staff expenses, 1% of $9 million.
We're not redebating.
90,000. I know we're not.
Yeah.
All I'm saying though, Mr. Mayor, is that there's no point in someone saying that I did this and I did that when I've got no right of reply. Stick to what it is.
I think it's legitimate debate when you've raised it in your address around what you did or didn't support, and I think the members are well within their rights.
I mentioned my name, so Mr. Mayor.
Well, you mentioned your own name.
You mentioned
and pointing out the when you mentioned Councillor Fowler, it's legitimate debate. It's not being non-factual. I think the record shows who voted what way, and my recollection is they are correct. So I think it's legitimate debate. I don't think they're being disrespectful. They're just stating facts. So I don't think there's anything further to rule on the point of order. Councillor Grafton.
And sorry, I wasn't actually getting you, Colin. I was correcting Annalise when she said she thought that we weren't increasing the grants money. We actually did increase it, which is where we got the extra 0.45, which you yourself passed and I passed to increase rates. And that's all I was getting at. As far as the rest of it, I don't want to see a 6.4% rate rise, but again, we've got to get the work done. And what's been happening as a first-time councillor, we're getting in the ear for what hasn't been done, and people don't want to pay for it, but we've had decades of not doing it, not doing enough, and for whatever reasons, it hasn't been done. We're paying a fortune now to do jobs would have cost a fraction and time's gone past, and it's just going on and on and on. And I just want to see us move forward and not keep going backwards to where we are at the moment. So I'll be in support of it.
Thank you. I'll go to councillors online, just give you a bit of a pre-warning. I'll be coming to you in a sec if you're not. Anyone else around the table have anything further to add? Nope. Councillor Webb or O'Keefe or Deputy Mayor Basher, I'll invite you if you wish.
Yeah, sure. I like everyone else. I'm a ratepayer in Westport, and we know the cost of our rates, but also know the cost of no spending as well. It just delays a rate rise to future generations or us in the future. I think we've toiled pretty hard to get a rates rise, which, you know, obviously is not fantastic still, but it's a lot more acceptable than it could have been. And, you know, we understand we want to live in a town that has facilities, that has first world facilities. We want to drink clean water. We don't want our sewage and our, you know, we don't want our stormwater and our wastewater plant. We want our roads with no potholes, but everything comes at a cost. And I do agree with Annalise. There might be an inflation rate, but it hasn't seemed to have been heard by the building sector in particular, whose cost increases have far outweighed inflation. And if we want the job done, we've got to pay the money. And unfortunately, there's only a small ratepayer base, but we need to get this work done to keep our place looking quality for future generations, for young families, to attract people into our community that want to live and work here.
Thank you. Anyone else online? Councillor Webb?
Yeah, just to reiterate, obviously none of us want a rate rise around the table. I don't know how throughout the year we could have done, you know, workshop more to try and get it down. I think what it comes down to is, yeah, we've got increasing costs. Our staff costs have gone up huge, but we're still under delivering some of our projects. So I don't know how that side of things concerns me, that we haven't got the final figure, but in deliberations when we asked the infrastructure services, you know, what I think it was Councillor Naylon asking, you know, what is the prediction of for this financial year of what are we coming into, what percentage of projects have actually been delivered, and it was looking quite low. So I hope that we aren't going to continue to overrate if we're not delivering on these projects, because I know everybody's stretched to the limit, and I just don't see how it's going to be sustainable over the next 9 years looking at the rate rises. But yeah, I guess we're at deliberations. There's nothing we can do today to cut the rates. So yeah, unfortunately it is what it is.
Thank you. You can ask a question for clarification.
Just on that, so if we're not, that work that's not being done this year and is going forward to next year, is that's being added on to the work? Like, when we've set this draft plan, did we know exactly how much wasn't going to be done the year before going forward? How does that actually work to correlate into setting this one? And have we, because we've had to, is it double rated and all that sort of stuff? How does it work?
Thank you, Councillor. There's no such thing as double rating because things are paid for once. So I think that's in terms of, there was a comment around maintenance work, which is different to capital work. So maintenance work is funded and paid for through rates and is rated that year. If it's not done, there may be a reserve of cash at the end of that year, which may go into the next year, but it's not rated for again in the next year. For capital works, one of the complications, and it's something that that we've been working hard on this year to try and understand, is the carryovers for projects that are multi-year projects, for example. So one of the big ones we're doing at the moment, for example, is the trunk main upgrade. That was always a multi-year project. So whilst there are funds allocated this year to do it, we can't spend all of those funds this year, and we were never going to spend all of those funds this year. So they do carry over into the next year. So as part of the thing about carryovers, if you're doing the work and you've got to finish it in the following year, it's absolutely appropriate and normal to do that. I think there may have been a history where funds for projects that hadn't been started were carried over, which is not good practice. We're going to make sure we don't do that anymore. So the ability to deliver the program, we've had a lot of work done in terms of what can we do, what do we have to finish doing from previous years, and we've got a high degree of confidence. I'm not quite sure that was the words that Stuart used. It's always a risk around that, but we have a higher degree of confidence that we are going to deliver the capital program. Okay, thank you. Okay, we'll draw that to a close and look to vote on the recommendations. So do you still want them taken separately, councillor? Yep, okay, so the same mover and seconder for 1 through 9. So recommendation 1, that council receives long-term plan 25 to 34 adoption report. All those, I'm not going to open these each for debate individually. I think we've debated. So all those in favour? Any against? That's carried unanimously. 2, that council approves and adopts the revenue and financing policy, rates remission policy, financial strategy, financial contributions policy, and the significance and engagement policy without amendment as contained within the attached Buller District Council 25 to 34 long-term plan. All those in favour? 1, 2, 3, 6, 7, 8. That's carried. Oh, sorry, those against. Beg your pardon.
Same trees, same recorded.
So it's 8 4 8.
Sorry, it was
8 and
against or
she was in favour of.
I'm not sure if Tony could hear you, Jamie. Sorry to interrupt.
Tony, can you hear us?
Are you making an amendment with that, taking the without amendment out of that number 2?
No, it was clarified that there won't be any changes to the policies.
Okay.
Won't be any amendments to those policies. So the motion's carried without doubt, but I think there's Councillor Sampson to record her vote against, Councillor Reedy to abstain, Councillor Namon was against. Yeah. So the motion's carried. Thank you. Recommendation 3, that council adopts the 30-year infrastructure strategy. All those in favour? Those against?
Same trees.
That one's carried. 1 against, 1 abstention. That council 4 adopts the fees and charges schedule that accompanies Buller District Council's 25-34 long-term plan to come into effect from 1 July 2025 for the 2025-2026 financial year. All those in favour? Those against? That one's carried. Over the page. Recommendation 5, that council, as per section 93 of the Local Government Act 2002, approves Buller District Council's 25-34 long-term plan as refined through the public consultation process. All those in favour? Those against? Motion is carried. That council receives the audit opinion from Ernst & Young on the long-term plan that is to be included within the long-term plan. All those in favour? Any against? That one's unanimous. Carried. 7, adopts the council's 2025-34 long-term plan, noting a total rates increase of 6.43% for the next financial year, commencing 1 July 2025. All those in favour? Those against? So it's 8-3. Am I not going too fast for you? You've got a recording. Okay, that council number 8. as per section 93 of the Local Government Act 2002, adopts the Buller District Council's long-term plan 2025-34.
Question, please. Right.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As per section 93, number 8, is that not the same as question 5? I know we've it's the one refined through public consultation process, but I see 5 and 8. I can understand 7 because it's agreeing to a rate increase, but for me, 8 and 5 are basically reading the same. Can I get some clarification on that, please?
I look to the team. They do look very similar. I think one is seeking to acknowledge that there were changes through the
Yeah,
consultation
I
process.
think number 5 was the fact that we followed through with the consultation process, and number 8 was just to approve the document as a whole. That makes sense. But yeah, I do understand it does look very similar.
I think it was, yeah. So I think for clarity, 5 is just to acknowledge that there was a public consultation process which, influenced some change, and then 8 is just saying
It's actually adopting it. Just the wording is slightly different. It's actually adopting it as opposed to noticing it very similar.
one is approved, one is adopt. Yeah, okay. So as written, as per section 93 of the Local Government Act 2002, adopts the Buller District Council's long-term plan 2025-34. All those in favour? And those against? That motion is carried. And that Council 9, approve the Chief Executive Officer or Mayor to sign off any grammatical or minor amendments to the final long-term plan document. All those in favour? And those against? That motion is carried. Thank you very much, councillors. That concludes those ones for that agenda item. Okay, moving on to agenda item 4, which is the last one for today. And these are the, I'll go to the team. Paul.
Through the Mayor, thank you. I'll just open this up and pass it over to Karen. So basically we've got in front of us setting of the rates for the 25-26 financial year. This is as the executive summary says, now that we've adopted the 25 to 34 long-term plan, council must look to resolve and assess the rates described in the rating impact statement. As it says there, we must cover up all the rates, definitions and details included in the funding impact statement. And that must also include the due dates for rates and metered water and how penalties will be applied. And you'll see the attachment there schedule has 4 different schedules covering all the different areas in which we charge for rates: general rates, water supply rates, sewage disposal rates, waste management rates. A lot of work has been done behind the scenes by the rating team, the finance team. There's been a little bit of work done, sample checking all this information to make sure the information is correct. We've got a very competent team that put all this information together, and there's also been some work done by the auditors on this as well. So we're confident that the information we're presented with is accurate. And I'll pass it over to Karen if she wants to add anything to what I've already said.
Thank you, Paul. No, that's good. And yeah, there's 2 options there. Obviously one for the status quo and one to not levy. So option 1 for the status quo to levy is our preferred option. We do have some of our rates team that can answer some questions, send some answers through to questions through to us that we can give back if there are any questions around this as well.
Okay, thank you. So the way I want to handle this, council, is because these are carefully worded resolutions that have obvious legal effect, and so I don't suggest that we plan on wordsmithing any of them. I plan on us taking them as 5A through to G as written. But before we do that, I'll call on any of you to ask any questions of those, or if there's a date wrong or something that you have picked up, then we correct it now, but still take them as a group rather than doing all of this one by one, unless for some reason we have to. Councillor Reedy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, obviously it's a contradiction for me to say that I'll support 5A because I've already gone against the rates listed. But everything else, B through to whatever, as you say, is required by, it's not for me to say that they're set and here they are here. I know what the rating, what the sections are. I know when the instalments are due. So if you're going to do it from A right through to the end, then I can't vote at all, because I have to agree with what these other ones are, if that makes sense, because that's what they are. But all I'm voting against is the fact that we've set a rate of 6 point whatever it is, and I'm saying it's not good enough, which is basically A. So I'm happy to go for 5A and then B all the way down. If you want to do it that way,
I can do that if you like.
B through to whatever.
Yep. I would. Yep. Okay. I can do that if you want to. I think I would counsel you to suggest that that your vote in the previous agenda item having been lost leaves you with a decision to make, doesn't it? In the sense that it is now inevitable, beyond your control now, that the LTP has been adopted, and one would have thought that an LTP once adopted needs funding, because that's how else would council legally do that. So I think if it offers you any counsel, then you could safely support the fact of vote to fund a plan, noting that you didn't agree with the plan in the first place. But that's it too. We can do A separately if that makes you feel more comfortable. We can do A separately if that makes you feel more comfortable. Right. Any other feedback on any of the recommendations, councillors? We'll do A and then we'll do B through to G and the sub lines under that. Whatever you call it. Okay. Well, I'll move that way. Is there a seconder? Councillor Fowler. Okay. So if there's no corrections, then we can open it for debate if required. Okay, so we'll do the first one first then. Request of Councillor Reddy that council resolves the following: that the rates listed in the attached Schedule 1, being those listed in the funding impact statement of the 25-26 financial year for the 25-34 long-term plan, as adopted at the council meeting of 30 June 2025, are set under the Local Government Rating Act 2002, the Act on rating units in the district for the financial year commencing 1 July 2025 and ending on 30 June 2026. All those in favour? Any against? One against. Now, I don't propose to read the rest out. They are in front of everyone, and anyone online can look up the agenda and see them. So we're dealing with 5B through to G, and all of their sub clauses against the numbers under them. That's been moved and seconded. Am I correct? Yes. All those in favour? Any against? So that's carried unanimously. Excellent. Thank you. That concludes that, doesn't it? Okay. There being no further business, I just want to again acknowledge councillors for what's a long, LTPs are a really long project, and it's been a weird arrangement this time because it is falling in an election year. Normally it's something that councillors get to do midterm in their training. So we're a bit out of whack with the way the legislation and things drove us. So I appreciate the effort everyone put into attending workshops and getting to the point today where we had a compliant long-term plan that has passed audit to relative reasonable satisfactory levels, I think, and to acknowledge John and the finance team, or the whole team, because every part of the council has to do a deep dive into their budgets and things to present through the finance team to produce this final document, but acknowledge that long-term plans, whilst trying to finalise annual plans and historic annual plans and everything else, is not an easy workload. So just acknowledge that for everyone in the team. And with that, we'll call the meeting to a close. There being no further business, close the meeting at 4:34. Thank you to those online. Thank you to councillors for attending.
Thank you.